here at TAFE, we teach you things, but not absolutely everything about everything. Okay, you got to get that through your head. So we're not going to teach you everything about everything to do with IT because it's impossible. So what we do is give you a good foundation, a base where you can actually can sort of learn for yourself as well as using the fundamentals that we're teaching you. So that's why these assessments, some things will contain things that require you to go out and get that knowledge. You get what I'm saying? Just like real life, you need you to go out and get this information, learn to learn, as they say. All right, so let's have a look at what we have to do for this assessment. Okay, so you guys all can see that, hopefully. And I'll just make it a little bit bigger. If you can't, just come closer because it's fairly important that we're talking about this. So if we look at, first of all, there's an assessment appendix. This is appendix is really additional files that you might need to actually get things done or to use. In this case, this is an appendix. And if you look at this, it tells you about a scenario. So for those of you who've been here at TAFE for a couple of a while, you might have done other subjects. You'll see that you are an employee of IT Works. If you're wondering what that is, that's basically our fictitious IT consultant, basically business. Okay, so you work for us, and there's another business called Earthy's Confectionery, which is our client, and they've engaged. So it's a family-owned business. They make just think Coopers, but it's lollies. Okay, think the Coopers family making beers, but it's instead of making beers, they're making lollies. Okay, and they've got a Adelaide site in the city and an Elizabeth site for their production site. Okay, so you can see that it's a family business. You can see that every one of these guys who are managers or CEO, a bit of nepotism there, has a surname of Ethel, a good Welsh name. Okay, so it talks about that. It talks about headquarters in Adelaide, a production site in Elizabeth, and basically they have computers. Funny enough, they have computers, but they're set up in a peer-to-peer network. I think we've mentioned that before. Okay, peer-to-peer means they're all equal, meaning there's no special computers like servers or anything like that. They're all basically computers like you got in front of you, and they're all got the workstation operating system. Come on in, guys, take a seat. We're just getting started with talking about the assessment. Okay, so you haven't missed too much. Just make sure you can see the front. Okay. So we're just talking about the scenario here for the assessment. It's a family business who has a peer-to-peer network, and they've called us. Our company's IT Works, and you guys are all IT consultants, as we call them, and you're working for us, but we're going to help this business. So they have a peer-to-peer network. It's a small business, a small family business, so there's no in-house IT support. It's really only the people with a little bit more knowledge. Like, for example, you might know like a few people. There's a few people with a little bit better IT knowledge. They're the ones that sort of getting things to work. But as a result, they're not properly trained, which means they're not, got to do things the proper way. They've done things, and hopefully it's working, but it's not necessarily done the proper way or the appropriate way. So they've got to keep that in your mind as you're thinking about these things. So each user stores their files on their own PC. So typical peer-to-peer network, I just save to the C drive. See? I just saved to the C drive, and obviously that's fine for your personal computer, but when you're working as a team, it makes it pretty hard to work on the same files, isn't it? So, for example, if we all had our files on our own computers, how do we share a file? Do I just email it to you? Do I just put on a USB stick and give it to you? Well, the problem with that is that I can do that, but the problem with that is you'll have a copy on your computer once you open it, and I'll still have the old copy on my computer. So then in 6 months' time, which copy is actually the right copy? You see how it can get out of sync, out of whack very quickly and gets confusing. So they've been using removable media, external storage, and even things like Dropbox, which is not ideal for this situation. Each department has a printer, but for anyone to print, they must actually take their document on a USB stick to the computer that's actually attached to the printer. So basically, it's basically installed on that one physical computer with USB, And obviously to get there, you have to log in and open the files and print. You get me? What I'm saying? A bit like what you might do at home if you've got a printer attached to one computer. So don't forget, these guys, you're probably going, whoa, how can any business be set up like this? Probably none in real life exactly like this. But to be honest, I'm trying to give you problems. I know. If it was a perfect, pristine condition network, what requirement would they have for us? You get me? So I'm trying to give you as many easy kicks at goal as possible so that you can identify, bang, 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 all these things are wrong. In real life, you'll probably find that there are businesses like this, but not necessarily to this extreme. Okay, management has realized that this may not be the best and most efficient way of business sustainability. When we say sustainability here, we're not talking about environmental, we're talking about the business being able to make money and continue to operate. Hundreds of hours of productivity are lost every year because files, incorrect versions, and generally staff not knowing how to access the current system. You know how it is. I lost the file. I've accidentally deleted a file. I've got the old version. You got the new version. Which one's the right version? Wasting time. Okay. IT Works has been commissioned to analyze and redesign the network. As an IT Works consultant, you have been engaged to complete the first stage of the network redesign process, and this is involving. So this is the first part. This is involving the upgrading of the organization's desktop workstation from Windows 8 to Windows 10. So we sort of talked about this right in the first couple of lessons. We talked about, the upgrade paths. Can we upgrade from Windows 8 to Windows 10? And probably the answer is yes. Okay, but should we upgrade? If you remember, we spoke about the pros and cons of upgrading versus migration. So maybe just have a look at that. If we look at the current hardware, it's a HP Compact 8100 desktop. They look like those ones that are actually on this trolley here. They look just like these ones. You know what? No need to guess where we got the specs from. It's those ones, okay? So basically, here's the specs. It's an i5 3.2 processor. I think that's actually better than what's in there. But basically, why we're giving you this hardware requirements, hardware specifications, is because we all know that every piece of software operating system, regardless of what, has what they call a minimum hardware specs and recommended hardware specs. So here's a link to get more information of this particular model. But you can see, hopefully there, you'll see that there's actually what you need to actually investigate that. Okay, so here's some business requirements. So if we actually have this as our network ID, remember we spoke about that idea, network ID, and I think you are learning more about that in Cisco anyway. We have a file server. This is not necessarily a server, if you like to think of it. So we need to implement the following design as a file server. So one of the PCs acting as a file server. So we're not going to have server, like server 2016, okay? That's the subject that's coming up. And you'll see that that is a further evolution of this company's network to incorporate servers. Right now, we just want to make sure that there's some file sharing, so that we're going to set up one of the workstations as a file server. And in the next couple of lessons, we'll learn how to share files, share folders, even though we sort of touched on that already with that sharing of the folder, if you remember. Then we have workstations where they have IP addresses, gateways, and DNS settings. And we have a network printer here. And the software we need on each program. So what we call this sometimes is the standard operating environment. Have you heard of that term before? SOE, standard operating environment. If you work in a factory, you might have heard about SOPs and SOEs. But here, when we're talking about IT, we're talking about what do we expect on these computers. As soon as you walked in, you know that these computers have the Windows 10. It has Office. It has VMware Workstation. It has access to the old drive. So you don't have to guess. You don't have to worry about those things because you know it's there. So this is what we need to have on each of the computers. Office, PDF, editing software, VLC media player, Firefox browser, and any additional software that's currently is installed in the current systems and that's required by users, as well as the printer, the HP printer installed. Okay. So the first part is Windows 10 Edition licensing. We need 6 licenses for the admin area, so it's not the whole company, just the office administration area. And with a view of rolling out Windows 10 on a total of 30 devices within 12 months and 50 devices over the next year. So basically, initially, we're going to do this, but then we're going to do that a lot down the track. Okay? So this is where we were talking about something before. Remember how we said we're going to learn? So you'll see that there's a user state migration tool. Okay, we mentioned this before. That's where you use it to back up your users' settings and files to somewhere. Okay, that could be a network share, could be a folder somewhere. But then once you've actually back up their settings, you can actually install a new operating system and you can restore those files and settings back on the new system, couldn't you? So that's what it's meant to do. Here's some configuration. We need to configure the power. Turns power monitor off after 30 minutes, puts computer to sleep after an hour, turns off hard drive. So we sort of spoke about power options as a general thing, but if you explore deeper, you'll see that that's something we can do. We can configure. But don't forget, these are not necessarily going to be all part of this first assessment. Okay, this is an appendix for the whole lot, all of the assessments. Okay, let's look at, without getting too much down the track, let's look at the first part. There's going to be a second part and a third part, and this first part is a written and oral. So a bit of a planning and gathering information, as well as determining client requirements. Okay, so if that appendix is giving you overall information, this is what we have to do. Okay, so if we have a look at this, here are some resources we need. A computer with internet access, Office, this is your physical computer, VMware Workstation, a Windows 8 virtual machine from your L drive, so you need to get that from our L drive to work on. That's your default workstation. That's as if it's in organization now. Okay. So if you're studying outside of TAFE, you can't get to TAFE. There's actually a way of actually getting access to this NAS from outside of TAFE as well. Okay. There's also a IT Works Policy and Procedure Sustainability Manual that you've referred to. Oh, and there's this IT Works Customer Site Induction course. Okay. So the last point is kind of funny. You're probably wondering, what the hell is he talking about? Basically, a lot of organizations, before you can actually get working on the site, who's got a job here? Who's actually worked somewhere? You probably agree with me that the first thing they'll do is induct you when you get to the organization, right? So they'll walk around, they show you where the toilets are, the evacuation procedure, a little bit like what we did in the first class. But a worksite induction has also the policies and procedures of this company. So basically, instead of actually getting you to go think of all those things yourself, we've actually wanted to package it up as a nice middle course. So IT Works. If we actually look at this, this is an IT Works site. Okay, so basically there's some basic information. It's one of those courses where you can just go through. It's very quick and easy. You go through, you do the little quizzes and little activities. It's and if you once you pass this or complete it, you are ticked off as having done the induction. A bit like real life. Okay, like we as lecturers often get these courses that we have to do, like manual handling refresher, because if we pick up that computer and I don't pick it up in the right way, then I might hurt myself, right? So it's one of these things. Make sure I go through the training. What we do is just make sure we read up anything that's interesting, that's not obvious. Go do the assessment at the end. Make sure that I use my common sense as well. Get through it, and then we've signed off as done that course. Okay, this is a bit like that. Let's go back here. So let's have a look at what we're actually asked to do. So this is the overview again. There's 3 parts. There's actually a prepare, which is a planning part, which is what we're talking about now. There's a do part, which is actually to create a virtual machine and migrate the settings like we talked about just before. That's not necessarily on 10 machines or whatever. It's only on 1 virtual machine. And then finally, a document. So part of the competency is to document instructions for your users. Okay, the best thing about creating instructions that your users can easily follow is it saves you a hell of a lot of time. Okay, remember those worksheets I've been creating for you? Anytime I make a mistake in there, everyone will be asking me about it. So I'll have 20 people asking me the same thing, and I'll go around helping 20 people. But if I get them right, I would have saved myself a lot of work straight away, because most people are able to work through it without too much help unless they really get in trouble, and I focus my time on those people. So that's why documentation, even though it sounds boring to most of us, is actually very important in the workplace, especially if you're in IT. So instructions, root through part A to C. The first part is task A, and you're being supplied with a virtual machine. Let's just go with this, okay? So the first thing we do is, as part of it, as a new contractor, you're required to go through this induction course. Okay, that's that middle course, very short, very quick, and hopefully very painless. Okay. Second part, preparation report. Write a preparation report in Microsoft Word that assesses the current admin office systems, Windows 10 installation options, licensing, hardware requirements, and includes an installation plan. So follow typical report format, include a title page, headings, style, table of contents, numbering, to aid readability, help reader navigate through the document. A bit like this document you're finding yourself. It's got a heading, it's got a contents, it's got different sections, right? Obviously, use your grammar and spell check. Put your name and ID on this so we can know who it is. And if you are using referencing, like for example, a website to get your pricing and stuff like that, put in a listing of your references. So right now, this is the sections, okay? So this is an overview of what you have to do. This is actually sections. Windows additions and features. So review and contrast the current operating system main features with other edition. Okay, so we're talking about Windows 8 right now. That's what they've got. What edition do they have? So obviously you've got that virtual machine that we're going to give you, and if you do something like it'll give you. You can see this one's the enterprise version, isn't it? Okay. Another way of doing that is actually right-click and go to System, and you can see that that's telling you a whole heap about the operating system and the system itself. Okay, so you can see there's a Windows Enterprise Edition again. So if you find that what they've got is Windows Home, okay, Windows Home, okay, you're probably smiling around the room. You know, that's going to lead to some problems in the future, okay? Because obviously Windows Home is not designed to work in a network with servers, and Windows Home will never be able to be added to a domain, Active Directory domain. So therefore, that's going to be a potential problem. So if you find it's Windows Home, I'm not saying it is, you've got to find out for yourself, just like in real life. If it is, then you can't upgrade that to a Windows 10 Home. You have to swap editions, but if you do, you got to tell your customer why. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure all you guys have been customers before, and you go to a motor mechanic. They say, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's going to cost you this much. Sometimes you'd like to know why Why are you changing those spark plugs when I changed it 6 months ago? Or maybe it's because you got oil and it's all clogged up. That's the reason. And now I understand. And now I'm willing to spend that money. You get what I'm saying? Always be customer client focused. Okay. The system type. What is the system type? Is it 32-bit or 64-bit? If you remember, we discussed that, isn't it? Didn't we? 32-bit is a little bit older, processes 32 bits of information at a time. 64-bit is the newer systems, processes 64-bit of information, and you'll find that all your modern operating systems are 64-bit. And review the current system type and note any limitations. So if they were 32-bit, is that limited in some way? Is that a problem? You get me? The file system. And we're going to talk about the file system next lesson, actually. So you'll see that some of these things that we're going to talk about is going to plug into your assessments. Review and contrast the main features and advantages of the current system and with other file systems. So, for example, the system you might find might be FAT, the file system, file allocation table, 32 or something like that. But the ones we might want is NTFS. But there's also REFS. What the hell is the difference between them? Okay, why would one choose one over the other? Current applications. Review the current applications by listing the application type, name, edition and version, and license and type, and the main features. So I think in the other document, you're already told that this is what we want. Okay, this is what we want as a minimum. But obviously, if the computers have other software on there, I'm not talking about what's default, what software that's as normal part of Windows. I'm talking about additional on top of Windows. Okay, just listen, put them in the table. Okay, put a table with all those things as headings, and then it's easy to fill out, isn't it? Okay, that's how I would format it. Makes life easier. It's easier. It actually presents the information easier as well. Identify and describe the tools and procedures that can be used to resolve any compatibility issues. Let's say they've got a version of software that's compatible with the old operating system, but not compatible with the new ones. What could we do? Possibly we could run it in a virtual machine. We could possibly, let me see, if this is the program, we could troubleshoot compatibility potentially, and we can go to compatibility and run this program in Windows 8 compatibility mode. You see that? So what if it's even older, Windows 7 compatibility mode? Maybe they'll get us around some of these things which runs on the old system, but maybe doesn't run natively on the new system. You see that? So I'm putting this part as the video. So if you did miss that part, you can always review the video later. All right, so now hardware requirements. Determine whether the current workstation meets the Windows 10 system requirements. Explain why or why not. So you saw in the other document, the hardware requirements. Do a bit of research. What is the Windows 10 hardware requirements? Okay, compare them. The main things are going to be your RAM, your hard drive space, and your CPU. Okay, and you'll realize soon enough that Windows 10 is not that demanding. I'm sure all of you guys will have games or programs that's more demanding than Windows 10 on your systems at home. Determine and provide reasons for hardware upgrades that could improve the Windows 10 performance. Let's say you discover, let's have a look, see if there's any limiting factors. All right, so like I said, the main things are the processor, the RAM, and the hard drive space. Well, a couple of things stand out. There's only 4 gigs of RAM. And there's only 320 gigs of hard drive. I'm not saying that doesn't meet the requirements of Windows 10. I'm just saying that seems a little bit low in this modern day, doesn't it? Yeah. So therefore, I can tell you now, the easiest way to improve a computer's performance is to actually upgrade the RAM. And also it depends what you need to do, but putting a solid-state hard drive in it as the system drive. But that's probably more than what these guys need, okay? So it's have to be appropriate for the situation. If they're office admin, they're just like everyday office workers. Do they possibly just need to check email, do word processing using Excel, maybe a bit of database, maybe, but probably not that crazy requirements. But if we actually, let's say I have no idea what Windows 10 hardware requirements. Look, someone's already asked a question. Here it tells us processor 1 gigahertz, RAM it's 1 gig for 32-bit, 2 gigs for 64-bit. Hard drive space, 32 gigs of free space. Okay, that's the minimum requirements, don't forget. Does our hardware meet that? Looks like it does, doesn't it? But to improve performance, maybe you could recommend more RAM as something, if you had to do something. But it'll go on the system from what I can see. All right. Installation and options and recommendations. By briefly review 3 main Windows 10 high-level deployment options. So when we're talking about deployment options, we're not talking about manually installing one at a time like we do if we only had one computer. Remember, this could be for 50 computers. So maybe we could do network deployment. I think we discussed that in the first lesson. We could do imaging. We could do what's an unattended installation with a USB stick and an answer file. We could use System Center Configuration Manager. Well, I've just thrown up 4 there, haven't I? Maybe remember a couple of those, do a bit of research, don't need to know how to do it, but just be able to briefly explain it in normal language, like you're going to tell, like I said, you're going to talk to your customer, you're going to say, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, explain what they are and the advantage of each, okay? Describe your deployment recommendation for the following. So basically, what are you recommending for this company? The system type, is it a 64-bit Windows 10 Enterprise or Professional, or what version is it? Okay. The file system you're going to use, is it NTFS, is it FAT, is it REFS? Which one would you recommend and why? Okay. Deployment options, so if they're brand new computers and you've got the backups of their settings, maybe you do imaging, because that'll let you build a sort of a golden master type computer, if you like, a pristine system, and they'll clone, and then we can almost like write that. It's not clone. I'm getting mixed up with my VMware, but it's like imaging. It's called imaging. Okay, so like for example, a semantic ghost or drive image, we'll actually just take a hard drive, and instead of making an ISO like we do with the DVD, we could actually make it into a file, or we can just copy that disk onto another system. We'll go do a few things to make it individualized, like sysprepping it, changing the IP addresses and the names, and then we restore the settings with the user state migration tool, right? Possible. I'm not saying how you should do things, I'm just giving you ideas. So just to make sure that you guys are all understanding what's required here. Installation media, including how you will set the system to boot from the installation media. So let's say we had an installation media of a USB stick. Will your system boot from a USB stick straight away? How would you change it so it would boot from a USB stick? Yeah, go into BIOS and change the boot order. Okay, that's a pretty common thing that's across the board for all computers, okay? So even your VMware, you can actually go here, and we can go to, let's go to this one. We can even go to power on to firmware. So that's effectively going to the BIOS. And I know this is a virtual machine, but this is actually based on a Phoenix BIOS, I believe. Damn, it's missing a file. Let's turn this one off. All right, we'll discard the thing, and we'll power on to firmware. So this is like what we're talking about, the BIOS. And if we actually go, this is a simple BIOS, by the way, but if on any BIOS, you should be able to go to somewhere where you can change the boot options. You can see there's remove devices, hard drives, CD-ROMs, network boot. Removable devices is pretty much the USB stick. Okay, so that's Not giving out the giving away the end of the story, but maybe that's something that refers to that. Okay. Then licensing. You know, with Microsoft, everything has to be licensed, everything has to be activated, and obviously Microsoft are not one of the biggest companies around the world because they give away things for free, right? So licensing. What is the licensing type? Provide reasons for your recommendation. Do we buy packages of licenses? Do we buy individual licenses? Do we buy a site license? What do we qualify for this scenario? So again, a bit of research. Licensing options, you can look at that. Well, it says Microsoft Volume Licensing. There's upgrades. Well, do we qualify upgrade? Enterprise for organizations, so orgs, like, I believe that's the non-profit type of organizations. I don't think we'll qualify for that one, but let's have a read. Maybe only licensing, so yeah, so just do a bit of research. I can't sort of go through that right this second, okay? But this is something that's not technical. This is something that's just that requires a little bit of research. So now, finally, there's a user state migration tool, if you remember. We mentioned that. Here's the documentation on it. So just like in real life, there's something that you don't know and you haven't been taught, or you don't remember, or you forgot. There's always some documentation. This is us getting you to go out and follow this link, read the documentation, and then, first of all, use a technical reference guide to help you plan the state migration. So plan it, explain the reasons for your choice, disk-based requirements, generate a report for Haley, Erful, and IT support accounts using the scan state tool. So that's using this user state migration tool to scan the computer. So like I said, you need to learn how to use it, and I think this document will show you how. Even if I didn't have that document and I was not sure, how to use USMT. Whoa, you know what? There's so much documentation on the internet. Whoa, there it is. This is how we use it. Here's some commands: scan state, collecting files. You know what? I don't like reading. How about I just watch a video? Well, that's an hour video. Well, here's a shorter one, but use your resources. The whole point of that is for us to get you to get used to learning how to learn. Okay, just as important as anything you learn here in class is learning how to learn for yourself. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to give you a desktop. We're going to give you a virtual machine, if you remember.
And that's already got the hardware specifications built in.
Oh no. Okay. The hardware is not that important as long as you check that the hardware can support the operating system.
Because you were talking about the migration
tool. Yeah. So.
That one just now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the USMT software. Okay. So you see that link that I gave you before that has the information on it. So you just have to work out how to use it and sort of use it. You know what I mean? But here's the Windows 8 virtual machine. So you don't have to create anything yourself. You're given an example of this. I know it's a virtual machine, but just pretend it's a real machine. Okay? That's an existing machine, if you like. Getting back to where we're here. So basically using that on that virtual machine. So estimate the final migration store size for all 5 users in a megabyte. So if we had to store all the settings and data onto somewhere, how much would we need space-wise? Explain why it's important to complete the planning tasks. I think if you read this, you'll be able to work that out. And then we talked about the standard operating environment. Remember how I said that table? The table where you reflect the application, the name, the latest version, the license type, the main features that you want to use out of it, and where you would obtain the application. So a lot of software these days, You don't necessarily go to shops and buy software these days. A lot of them require you to go to a website to download it by Mozilla. Who will go to a shop to buy Mozilla Firefox? I don't think you literally can go to any shop and ask for Mozilla Firefox. So where are you getting it from? Okay, so Microsoft Edge. Okay, this is Microsoft class, so I can't say anything. I'll keep my opinions to myself. With the network configuration, here's the network ID, default gateway, subnet mask, and DNS. The range. Well, to be honest, isn't that given to you? Gateway, DNS. Isn't that all given to you? It's pretty much you have to just populate with in here, don't you? Populate the right ones in here. And you might be wondering, hey, what does he mean by this X here? Well, everyone should be a little bit unique, shouldn't they? So what I will get you guys to do is that this X, you substitute with your day of birth. You get me? So if you were born on the 17th, for example, you would put number 17 here for you. So that means every one of you guys should have something that's fairly different. Okay, there might be 2 people born on the 25th, so be it. But you know why? Because when you actually go do it, one of the requirements for us as lecturers is that we need to make sure that these assessments are authentic. So you know, with virtualization, with files, being able to copy so easily, who's to say that someone doesn't just get someone else's completed work, make a clone of all their virtual machines, right? So, well, they can clone it, but then they have to go back in and change all these aspects of it. So that's a way of us getting it to be more authentic. Okay, so security requirements. Summarize username convention. So, you know, are you going to have a set convention? Convention is a set of rules. Okay, you might notice that your username in here in this classroom or in TAFE is your first name dot your surname at tafesa.edu, at student.tafesa.edu.au. It's always like that, isn't it? So that actually means it's actually a convention or a rules of how we do things. So we want you to actually summarize a username convention for this organization. Come up with one. One would, what if you have 2 users with the same first name, last name? What are you going to do then? Your rules should allow for that. Password policy? Well, you know, summarize a password policy. What password policy? Can people just not have a password? That's not a good idea, is it? If they have a password, can they just leave the same password forever? Probably not a good idea either. If they have to change it, how regularly should they change it? How long should their password be? Just some ideas. Okay, should they use complex passwords, which means they have to use special characters? But you got to balance it with usability as well. So if you say, oh, everyone's password has to be 20 characters in length, what are you going to do if someone said your password has to be 20 characters in length, guys? What would you do? Would you be able to remember it easily? You're nodding your head. I don't think I would be able to remember it easily. What are you going to do instead of remembering it? Write it down. And where do I need it? On this computer. I might write it down on a sticky note and I will stick it right on my computer. So that defeats your password policy, doesn't it? So something that's usable and secure, but usable. And any other requirements? Well, we talked about firewalls, didn't we? We talked about administrator accounts, external user accounts. Maybe these users are not necessarily going to be administrator users, are they? Because if they're administrator users, that means they can do things that could wreck the system as much as do anything. So maybe making them all standard users, maybe, just throwing it out there. Maybe having Windows Defender. Remember we talked about that as well as a virus scan, or having some other antivirus. What else? Okay, so just a couple of things there. So here's the installation plan. This is where we have to look at what tasks we have to do to achieve this successful project. Like if I always use this example, if I was a tradie and you wanted me to build a fence for you, just your fence down the side with your neighbor. Well, first of all, I would have a plan. I must dig the holes first, then I create the foundations, I put the posts in, then I put the fence in, and then I clean up, and then I get you to sign off. or that's a rough estimate of what all the major tasks I have. But then I might say, hey, digging the holes might take me about 3 hours because I use just a shovel. Putting the posts in might take this other amount of time, doing this another amount of time. Just to estimate, the whole project is going to take me 2 days because based on my calculations. That's at least some sort of plan, isn't it? But then how do I know if I've done a good job, like as in the fence is okay? I might actually test it by actually leaning something on it or doing some standard testing. How long would that take? So if I work out how long things are going to take, I might say, hey, I need access to your site, your driveway or your house on Friday, the 16th of March. Well, I've got to let the customer know, don't I? I also have to let the customer know while I'm doing this, I'm going to be accessing your house and I'm going to need access to your driveway, and you probably can't park your car in there because I'll be blocking off the whole driveway with my tools and stuff. So I'm going to tell you what services are disrupted, aren't I? So how long is it going to be disrupted for? It's going to be for 2 days. So if you're going to maybe you can park on the road, or maybe at 5 p.m. I'll pack my tools away so you can get up your carport. But you got to make arrangements with your customer of what service or what things are going to be affected. And then you're going to negotiate, you got to take this plan and go to your your client, and you're going to negotiate, is this okay? You can't just show up because that's your plan. What if you said the 16th of March, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do on 16th of March, and then the customer goes, oh, not 16th of March. I've scheduled the air conditioning guy on that same day, and they'll probably need access to my house as well. So you got to make sure it's a negotiated plan that both parties are okay. So briefly describes some contingency plans. So let's say it turns out that the post digging was a little bit harder because, or the hole digging was a bit harder because there's rocks. Or maybe I need to rent a jackhammer. Maybe I'll leave some slack time, sort of like a little buffer of time to allow for any problems like that. WHS precautions while we're working on the client site. So don't forget, we've got a normal office environment in the city, but we've got a production site, which is like a factory floor. And what's even worse is a food production site. So maybe some of the WHS could be including wearing personal protective equipment, using food safety handling procedures, or avoiding food production areas at all. Okay. What steps have you taken to minimize the disruption? So maybe you've scheduled it to be done after hours. Well, is that going to increase the cost? Maybe you've scheduled it to do it on weekends. Again, is that going to increase the cost? Or are you going to be doing it at a time that's going to minimize the disruption? All right. So basically with your plan, you're going to have a meeting with your lecturer. Okay, guess what? I'm going to be Haley Ethel. Okay, so you're going to meet with me and we're going to role play you explaining your plans to me, obtaining the standard operating environment list of applications that meets my requirements. So we've given you the list, but you can ask for any other software and stuff like that. Make arrangements to access the site, complete the installation, and advise me of wherever downtime there might be possible. Okay, and reach agreement on the final schedule, which means, yeah, we've said the 16th. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with these services being off or these things not being able to be used at that time. And you basically just your interpersonal communication skills to reach an agreement. I'm not going to be hard. You're going to tell me something, I might throw up a few problems, see how you react, but we're going to get there eventually to agree on something, okay? So just make sure you have some, in your back of your mind, what if the customer says, I can't access it on this date? What are you going to do? Just go, no. What about the following week? Or what about the day after? Just propose it another time, okay? Make any necessary adjustments to your preparation report based on what the customer said. Obviously, the customer says, you can't do it on the 16th, you've got to do it on the 17th. Your plan's not going to just say 16th still, is it? It's going to be changed for the 17th. If the customer gives you a whole another list of software, then in your table that you get, you got to put those in as well, okay? So I know it seems like a lot, but if you actually focus on individual components of it, none of it is super hard. It's just one of those things that we have to do, get through, and we'll give you the tick if you've done a good job and move on. Okay, then that's hopefully what I want to do, because it's a lot easier for me to mark good work than work that's not that great, because that requires a lot more feedback. I'd rather pass you than anything else. Any questions at this stage? Yeah.
We're not doing the interview at the start to ask questions, are we?
No, you're going to have a plan and develop a sort of a schedule, like a plan for the installation before we have the interview. Okay. So basically, that interview is for you to communicate your plan to the person, and for me to throw up some spanners so you can make some adjustments. Okay. Is that okay? Anything else? Not at this stage. Or if you do think of it, definitely ask.
Just you mentioned about the factory.
Yeah,
You're
factory.
training that as well.
Well, that's at the.
Remind us in that part.
Oh no, like you're right. There's two locations, a headquarters in the city, and Elizabeth Downs area, which is the production site. Okay, so obviously where are these computers that we're doing initially are located? Well, you don't know, but reality is, if you ask, then you'll know, don't you? So what if you got this as a real life job and you didn't know that? What would you do? Communication, and checking facts doesn't hurt to ask. Okay, you're not like, people are not going to think you're silly for asking questions. You're only silly if you make assumptions that it turns out to be incorrect. So ask if you don't know. Okay, and I'll leave it up to you to ask, because that's how how real life is.